Army wife life is not for people who can't handle it.
I'm just gonna go straight out there and say it.
Me and my husband have been married for almost 2 years now. In a month it'll be 2 years. And I love him to death. But I thought I loved the Army wife life. Just really don't. And I just had my second baby. I have a 1-year-old and a 2-month-old. And it is not easy, ladies. It is really not. And for those of you who have 2 young kids, or just young kids at all, you know
exactly what the fuck I'm talking about.
I'm over here doing it by myself, 2 kids. I moved houses when I was 9 months pregnant.
The autopsy is being done on these bones that were dug up in a shallow grave off of Highway 54. It's outside of El Paso.
This is Charlie Moreno.
This is Andrew Litton, and this is Testify.
Let me just start by saying I'm a very colorful individual, to say the least. I have a lot of personality, more than most.
That's Jenna Ferry. She was Jenna Mae Johnson, a young girl from St. Charles, Illinois, who married Jeffrey Adam Ferry in El Paso, Texas, in September of 2011.
And yes, I'm in the middle of smoking, and I don't want to hear anybody judging me about how bad smoking is for you, because I've heard it all before, and I don't care, and I'm not stopping. Moving on.
Jeffrey was also from St. Charles. They met shortly after high school, and he joined the Army. During this time, he was a specialist assigned to the 1st Armored Division, and he was stationed in Fort Bliss, Texas.
He'll be deploying for his second time again in March.
The recording you're hearing is shortly after Jenna gave birth to her second son, Jackson Ferry. Jeffrey was about to head out on his second deployment. Jenna, who wasn't working at the time, had several hobbies to keep her busy while her husband was on deployment. She was an avid fan of street and drag racing. Jeffrey and her would often visit the El Paso Motorplex, a popular strip racetrack in Clint, Texas.
Let me just get this through. If anybody from El Paso sees this, do not try to race me unless you have a car you know you're going to win with.
Jenna was active on Facebook and Instagram, but she also started a YouTube channel to showcase her views on being an Army wife.
Since I have an addiction to Netflix, it's watching Drop Dead Diva. I don't know how many of you girls out there know the show. There was a girl who was blogging and getting sued. Not the point of this. I decided, why not start my own video blog type deal? Like, I'm not going to do the daily blog because, you know what, I don't got time for that. As much as I think about it and while my husband's at work, why not? It's fun. I'll get comments. People can talk, whatever.
Her videos on YouTube consisted of rants about street racing, being a white girl and liking rap music, and about other military wives cheating on their husbands.
All these girls who deploy, all these other Army wives and girlfriends and stuff. I have a ton of friends in the military because I don't even like girls. I'm friends with more guys than I am with girls. I hate girls. Whatever. All the guys will come home and be like, oh, my wife cheated on me. I'm getting a divorce after this. Like, bitches, if you can't handle 9 months of a deployment by yourself, you got his money. Well, if you have a guy who's willing to let you use his paycheck to live off of while he's gone, either way, you don't need to cheat. It's 9 months out of your whole lives together if you're married. Come on now, if you can't handle that, you shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, come on now. It's 9 months. If you can't go for cheating that long, you should really rethink your relationship strategies. Like, seriously. And then I'm over here doing it by myself, 2 kids. I moved houses when I was 9 months pregnant, okay? From a 3rd floor apartment, we had to fold the fucking mattress up to get it upstairs into my bedroom. So, I mean, come on. The shit is not that difficult. But I'll be posting more depending on what comments I get. Ta-ta!
While Jeffrey was out of the country on deployment, Jenna ran into some pretty serious problems with her children. According to complaint affidavits, Jenna was arrested in June 2012 for child abandonment with intent to return. Jenna had been pulled over for speeding at 97 miles per hour on Loop 375, which connected the east side of El Paso to the northeast. Jenna told police officers that she'd left her son at home. The police officer asked if she had a car seat for the baby, and Jenna said that she did, but didn't know why she didn't take her infant son Blake with her. She estimated Blake had been alone for about 40 minutes. Upon arriving at the home, police officers documented that the living conditions were not optimal, and there were bottles of alcohol throughout the apartment.
According to a news article on KFOX 14's website by Joshua Zuber, a separate complaint affidavit for Jenna indicated she was charged with an additional count of abandoning or endangering a child about 1 month later. Jenna allegedly left her baby Blake alone in July of 2012 while she went on a road trip to Elephant Butte, New Mexico. She also admitted that she left him alone when she went to the movies. Investigators said that a friend found baby Blake in awful conditions. Feces were reportedly found on the mattress and the sheets where baby Blake was sleeping. Jenna also admitted to the police that she left the baby alone for 5 to 6 hours on occasion when she went to the mall. In all, Jenna had been charged with 3 felony counts of child endangerment, abandonment with intent to return.
A year after Jenna's guilty plea, Jeffrey was finally home from his deployment, and the couple now had a new son, Jackson, who had been born in June while Jeffrey was away. The couple resumed their usual hobbies, including a return to the El Paso Motorplex, where they were often seen racing their vehicles.
According to some people who knew Jenna, Jeffrey would watch the kids while Jenna raced. On Wednesday, November 13th, 2013, Jeffrey didn't show up to Army formation. His fellow soldiers called and texted him, but there was no answer. The next day, he didn't show up for work either. On Friday, November 15th, Jeffrey was still missing from formation. No responses. Fort Bliss sends a squad to check on Ferry at the house on the west side. The landlord opens the house and the squad sees the house ransacked. They call the police. The landlord gives access at 1424. A suicide note is found.
2 Frank 141 headquarters.
2 Frank 141, go ahead.
10-4, ma'am. Authority 2 Lincoln 42. Can you clear this unit for a spot broadcast?
Headquarters to all units. Prepare to copy a spot broadcast. 2 Frank 141, go ahead.
2 Frank 141. In reference to attempt to locate possible suicidal subjects, all units be on the lookout for a 2007 Dodge Charger, dark blue in color, black rims, tinted windows. Vehicle should be driven by a white male, Jeffrey Ferry, 6'12", 91. It's going to be a white male, 6 foot tall, 163 pounds, blonde hair with brown eyes. Should be in the company of a white female, Jenna Ferry, 6'10", 93, 5'10", 188, blonde hair, hazel eyes. 2 children should be in their custody, a 1-year-old and a 5-month-old. 2 Frank 141, clear.
Headquarters to all units. Authority 2 Frank 141, copy information. Headquarters clear at 1616.
62, Adam. I can start up that way.
Police units throughout the entire city of El Paso began looking for this 2007 Dodge Charger, blue with black rims and tinted windows. The El Paso Police Department called in for air support. Due to the high winds that evening, they were unable to get a helicopter up in the air. A few minutes later, a patrol unit called for assistance when they spotted a vehicle possibly matching the description. The car was on Trans Mountain Road. According to the police radio log, that was not the same car. The search was on to find Jenna, Jeffrey, and their 2 young boys.
6 days after the couple was reported missing by the El Paso Police Department, media reports began circulating after crime scene investigation units showed up in the remote desert area near Oro Grande, New Mexico, about 50 miles from the El Paso city limits. Drones sent up in the air by the El Paso Times showed police working under several canopies about half a mile off of US 54. Here's El Paso Police Department spokesman Daryl Petrie explaining their findings to reporters at the scene.
In response to that location, officers found that a family of 4 was absent from that location, and an investigation began with the Crimes Against Persons unit of the El Paso Police Department and the FBI El Paso sector. As a result of that investigation, 3 people were located in Michigan. That is going to be the husband, the wife, and 17-month-old child of the Ferry family. Now, who was not located was 5-month-old Jackson Ferry. The investigation continued. Yesterday evening, the El Paso Police Department's Crimes Against Persons unit and the El Paso FBI sector was brought to this location in Oro Grande, New Mexico. As a result of the investigation that proceeded today, a body has been recovered. It is believed of 5-month-old Jackson Ferry. The Crimes Against Persons Unit and the FBI El Paso sector will continue this investigation as it moves forward. Obviously, the investigation is continuing and charges are pending in this case. As soon as information about the charges are drafted, we will be getting that information out to you.
What brought you to this location?
You know what, it's going to be a part of the investigation, and unfortunately at this point in time, we're not going to be able to disclose that, but very good question. Thank you.
Just 2 days before Jackson's body was located, Jenna, Jeffrey, and Blake Ferry were found at the Eagle's Nest Motel in Escanaba, Michigan. Jeffrey is arrested for being absent without leave from his duties. His bail is placed at $1.5 million. Child Protective Services offices in Escanaba take custody of then 17-month-old Blake Ferry. Jenna tells police that Jackson is with his grandmother. Police call Jenna's mother and she denies her story. Jeffrey is released to military authorities and sent back to El Paso on November 19. The day of the press conference, police believe that they have found the body of 5-month-old Jackson Ferry in a shallow grave near Oro Grande, New Mexico. Police had used cell phone records and cell phone towers to find the general area of Jackson's grave.
I'm Nancy Grace. I want to thank you for being with us. Bombshell tonight. Off the top, we go live. El Paso suburbs. A happy family of 4, mommy, daddy, 2 little boys, infants, just 19 months and 5 months. At this hour, police excavating what we believe to be the remains of 5-month-old baby Jackson. Michael Board, WOAI. Why do we believe that this baby was killed or at least buried there?
We do found remains, and as we go to air tonight, we know that the autopsy is being done on these bones that were dug up in a shallow grave off of Highway 54. It's outside of El Paso, a small town in New Mexico. It's an area of the McGregor Range. It's an area that was used for military training. And Nancy, as we know, Jeffrey Ferry, the father who went missing and was found, was in the military. He was a specialist in the Army. He would have known this area perfectly. If you're looking for the place to dispose a body, Nancy, this Army person would know exactly where to go.
The Border Patrol finds a photo of the vehicle traveling by the checkpoint 4 days earlier at 4:36 a.m. Jackson's body was in a high state of decomposition. His tiny body had been buried there in the desert for almost 3 weeks. Police determined that he had died on October 27th, his body laid alone in the shallow grave while his parents planned their escape. When police found Jeffrey and Jenna, they were both held on warrants. Jeffrey on a federal military warrant, and Jenna was held on a fugitive warrant for probation violation stemming from the child abuse charges. El Paso Sheriff's Office released a statement that Jenna Ferry will not return to El Paso right away. The extradition process takes about 10 days. She returned to El Paso on December 3rd, 2013.
Rick and Estella, so many unanswered questions, and tonight Jenna Ferry didn't answer any of them. There was an overwhelming sense of apathy in the air as media swarmed her and asked her what exactly happened. It's very calloused, Rick and Estella. She even smiles at one point or gives a hint of a smirk. Her smell, you could tell that she possibly hadn't bathed in a day or two. There was body odor. It was disturbing and very upsetting to watch, but media bombarded her with questions. Did you kill baby Jackson? Whose idea was it to bury him? Do you miss Jackson? Do you consider yourself a good mother? She didn't answer any of them. All she had to say was no comment, and then she stared ahead.
Both Jenna and Jeffrey plead guilty to their charges. They each plead separately.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. So one thing I'm not really sure about is how to pronounce your name. I apologize.
You can call me or you could just call me Kat.
Kat? Okay. Is that the name you want to go by for the interview?
Kat, yeah.
Kat, okay. So I guess the first thing that I wanted to ask is how you came to meet Jenna.
I met her probably in like 2006, 2007, and I went to school with her.
Was that in Michigan or Wisconsin, or where did she go to school?
St. Charles East.
How did you guys meet? Were you guys in the same class, or?
She was in one of my classes. I wasn't really friends with her. She kind of was not the nicest person to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
but I know that one of my friends was actually her friend, so we kind of said like hi, and we started talking a little bit, and then after high school, that's when we started talking a little bit more, and she kind of drifted apart.
So more like acquaintances.
Yes.
Yeah. And what do you remember about her? What was she like back in high school?
She was always in and out of juvenile.
Oh, really? Like,
yeah.
They're at school or outside of school?
Outside of school, she was always like stealing, and she was also like in actual jail.
Oh, really?
For children.
Do you know what that was for?
I think she said it was like stealing, and she thought it was cool, and I was like, oh, that's not cool.
Right. And so do you recall how she was in high school as far as her grades? Did she ditch school a lot, or was she worried about her grades at all?
No, she ditched school a lot. I remember one of the times I was asking her if she was going to come to gym class. And she's like, no, I'm actually ditching. I'm like, oh, okay. See you later then.
Yeah. Do you remember if she was ever like into alcohol or drugs or anything like that during that time?
I'm pretty sure, but I don't know because I wasn't in that crowd.
Yeah. Do you remember her ever talking about Jeffrey?
Well, they weren't together they were in high school. It was after high school.
It was right after? Okay.
The relationship was very interesting because they would always break up and then get back together. And she would be dating other people while she was dating him.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. Do you know, can you tell me a little bit about what she was like as far as relationships back then?
She was never in an actual relationship in high school, and then Jeffrey was probably the first person I actually saw her in a relationship. After she got out of high school, she actually called me up and was trying to get me to do like this sugar daddy stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of dangerous, like I don't want to do that. So she was saying that she was going out on these dates. And sometimes the guys would ask for favors and stuff, and I'm like, no, I'm okay. You can go by yourself. And I'm assuming that she went through with that, and that was also while she was still dating Jeffrey. She went off of a website. She would meet the guys, and then she would go in person.
After high school, did you still keep in touch with her, or?
Every once in a while, yeah. I was also friends with her on Facebook. Probably the most creepiest part about it was I was talking to her up until we found out what happened, me and my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And just some of the things that she said to me while I was going through something, because I had some health issues during my pregnancy with my son.
Yeah.
And that was around the time that she was actually being searched for. I didn't know because I was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And she was just talking about her son and everything, and then we found out that they were all being looked for and stuff, and then what happened. So.
Since you had been talking to her leading up to that, do you remember her on Facebook? Would she post about her kids or anything like that?
Well, it first started the funny thing about everything is the fact that my birthday is the day after Jackson was born.
Okay.
Me and my son's father went to go see the baby because it's a new baby, and we were like, oh, baby. And we were about to have a baby ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's when we met Jackson, and then after that, they went back to Texas, and we saw a few posts of the babies on the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was strictly cars and video games. And then I remember around Halloween, I was like, why doesn't she have any postings of her kids in Halloween costumes? Because that's usually what parents post.
Yeah.
Well, that's because that happened.
So by that time, Jackson had already passed away?
Yes. According to the reports, though.
Right. Yeah, from what I have, it says that baby Jackson had died from choking on his fluids on the 27th of October. It wasn't until about 2 weeks later that Jeffrey didn't show up to work.
I've been trying to follow this case and trying to like figure out what happened because, I mean, it's just sad.
Right. A lot of people have said that Jenna was really manipulative, that she was really controlling of Jeffrey. Is that kind of the description that you would give Jenna from the time that you've known her from high school up until this happened? Did she seem like that manipulative or controlling type of person?
Yes. I remember when I had my son, it was actually my daughter, my daughter, this is before Jackson was born or before her pregnancy, showed her a picture of my daughter, and she was saying something about how she wants another baby, but Jeffrey didn't want another baby, so she was going to have to go and find another guy to go have a baby with, and then he's going to take care of the baby. That was pretty disturbing. And then what she said with Blake when she was pregnant, because we were telling her, don't go on the airplane to Texas because you're really far along and you might end up going into labor and hurting the baby. And she's like, oh, well, if this one dies, I'll just make a new one.
Oh, wow.
So she was pretty manipulative.
Wow.
We had to, me and my friends had to do more digging because we didn't know that she actually had previous child endangerment cases on her. And we didn't know that. We were I started questioning, where are your kids? Why are your kids never with you? Or Blake, when he was a baby, where is your baby? I guess Jeff is home or something. Because that's what a reasonable parent thinks, is that there's somebody home with the baby.
Right.
But I actually did not know that she was leaving the babies alone, or else I would have called the police on her. But on her Facebook, I would see her in her car, and then you would see a picture where it's a little turn, and there's a car seat in there, but there's no baby in there. And you're just oh, I guess Jeff is home watching the baby again?
Mm-hmm.
But it would be every 3 days that she posts a new picture up.
Did she ever talk to you or text you about her kids? Ever ask for any advice as far as their care, or?
No.
Are you aware of them having any financial issues during that time?
She always wanted to make it look like she had more money than everybody else, so she never really wanted to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I would always ask, how are you doing that? How are you getting a house at this age? I'm trying to get a house, but I still have to work. And she would be oh, I'm not going to tell you my secrets and stuff, but, she wouldn't say that or really hurting for money or anything. And then she would brag about, oh, I got a house at this age and everybody else is working harder and I'm all set. So. And
as long as you've known her, have you ever known her to work? What type of jobs has she had?
I actually have not even remembered her working.
You don't recall her ever working any place at all?
No.
Okay, Kat. Thank you again. You have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye. Kat was able to give us a lot of information about Jenna's behavior from high school up to the point of Jackson's passing. But we also wanted to speak to somebody that can tell us a little bit about Jeffrey. So we contacted Joe Spencer, and we met up with him for an interview.
Okay, first off, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us your title?
My name is Joe Spencer. I'm an attorney here in El Paso.
Joe Spencer was Jeffrey Ferry's court-appointed attorney.
The case involving the death of Jackson Ferry, and he was the infant son of Jenna and Jeffrey.
Correct.
And we just want to make it clear, you represented Jeffrey.
Correct.
Okay, and you did not represent Jenna.
That is correct.
Now, how did you get the case? Do you guys rotate on do they assign you cases? Because I know it's kind of you and Dolph and...
Right. Yeah, there are a certain number of lawyers on the capital murder, what they call wheel, that are qualified to handle capital murder type cases. And you're right. As far as I understand, it's on a rotation type basis, and then the judges just will assign a lawyer to it.
Okay, so you were assigned this particular case.
I was court appointed, that's correct.
Okay. And Jeffrey and his wife Jenna were both charged with injury to a child but by omission, which is not a murder charge. Can you explain why Jeffrey specifically, that was your client, why he was not charged with murder?
Yeah, well, why he was not charged, that'd be up to the DA's office. I will tell you probably because the way the evidence indicated that. There was nothing in the body that indicated that there was any sort of an intentional act on the part of taking the life of an individual. There are lesser offenses under murder that depends on the culpable mental state of a person. Manslaughter would be, for example, one that would be reckless conduct, or negligence would be criminal negligent homicide. So there's more than one way for a person to be charged when a life is taken. And murder requires the mens rea, or the culpable mental state of intentionally and knowingly taking that life. In the Ferry case, this was a child that really died of malnutrition. So it was more of neglect by omission, not anything intentional. I don't think there was any way that Jeffrey intended for his son to die. And what was quite clear is that Jeffrey was overseas for a good portion, 9 months of his deployment he was overseas. He comes back to the States. He's sent to temporary duty, sent off to California for another month. He comes back, and within a month, that baby dies. And it turns out that the baby died of malnourishment. Jeffrey, if you ever saw him, was very thin individual. It was natural for him to see his son thin because that's the way he was as well. But he had asked his wife, hey, the baby seems really thin. Is the baby okay? Baby's fine. Baby's fine. We later find out that when Jeffrey wanted to take the baby to the doctor to get checked, Jenna said no, because what Jeffrey did not know is that while Jeffrey's stationed overseas, Child Protective Services had intervened and had actually made accusations of Jenna for neglect to the child. He didn't know about any of that while he was overseas.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. So he was not aware of any of the CPS involvement with Jenna while he was... Not
while he was overseas. When he came back, he found out about it. So when he told her and he was concerned about the baby, about Jackson, she said, look, we can't go to the doctor because I have this case that's still kind of pending. CPS is on me and I don't want them to know, but I assure you there's nothing wrong with him. He's fine.
So according to Jeffrey, she basically told him, like, we can't take him to the doctor because we'll end up getting him taken away from us, or kind of that was the...
That was the essence of the conversation that Jenna had with Jeffrey.
Now, going back to the murder charge and the injury to a child by omission, I know that there are scales as far as like the punishments are concerned. What's the difference in max punishments between those two charges?
Well, on first-degree felony still carries 5 to 99 years or life. The fact that it was not a capital murder case, which would have carried an automatic life sentence, is a huge deal. So, once you go to a first-degree murder case or a first-degree offense, it's 5 to 99 years or life. Second degree is 2 to 20 years, and third degree is 2 to 10 years.
Both parents ended up taking a plea in the deal. Jenna was sentenced to a higher number of years. Was that suggested by you, or was that something that he wanted to do, was take that plea? When you say he wanted, you're asking about Jeffrey. Jeffrey.
Yeah, Jeffrey did not want to, he understood his responsibility and where he failed as a father, that he should have probably stepped up and, notwithstanding what Jenna was telling him, stepped up and said, I'm taking my child to get medical care because I don't care about CPS. I'm more concerned with his welfare. But if you knew the relationship and the dynamics between Jeffrey and Jenna, she was very much the dominating person in that relationship. She's very much the one that dictated everything.
According to Spencer, Jeffrey Ferry received an injury settlement that Jenna spent while he was away on deployment. However, our investigation revealed that it wasn't actually an injury settlement, but Jeffrey's family inheritance that Jenna blew through on cars and other luxuries while he was away.
And she did nothing but party and posted on Facebook. And it was just incredible how she just blew all that money away.
That actually was one of my questions that I had here. Initially, it was my understanding that it was actually Jeffrey's money, but you say it was Jenna's?
Well, Jenna's the one that got the money because he's stationed overseas. So she's the one that took advantage of that situation. And
so it should have been his
and actually, settlement. You can argue that it's a community estate, so he's entitled to part of it. She was entitled to part of it, and she's the one that ended up just partying it away and posting it on Facebook.
The media portrayed the living conditions in the home as kind of deplorable, like they didn't have beds or just common things that you would normally see in a family home. And yet she has been spending a lot of money. Is that an accurate representation of what was happening in that home?
Yeah, I think it's fairly accurate. She was interested in fast cars, fast men, and she was a loose woman, is really what it came down to. As I understand it, I had illicit affairs with a lot of other individuals and just had a really good time while he was overseas defending our country. Jeffrey is very soft-spoken, very mild-mannered. You would think an individual that was deployed overseas, that was in the military, defending our country, could kind of stand up for himself. But he really was a subordinate in that relationship. She was a dominant person in that relationship and manipulated him pretty well.
Now, they both fled to Michigan.
Correct.
After the burial of Jackson.
Correct.
Jeffrey was extradited back to El Paso first. Was there a reason that he was the first and the fastest to be extradited back here?
Well, Jeffrey waived extradition, and he wanted to come back. And it's interesting the way it happened. When they realized that Jackson had passed away, she talked him into, we got to go, we got to run. Well, where are we going to go? I'm in the military. I can't just, I would be absent without leave. I'd be AWOL. I mean, there's going to be other consequences. No, we just got to get away. We got to get away. And they went back to really her home state, where she had some sort of family members that was going to give her some sort of shelter. But it was not realistic. I mean, they were very close to the Canadian border. If they really wanted to flee, I mean, we're right across the street from the Mexican border. They could have done that. They just didn't know what to do. And she talked them into, we just got to bury the body. And that's what they did. Now,
that brings me to a question that I don't know that I've seen it brought up. As far as Jeffrey's intellectual abilities, would you say that she was also the intellectually dominant of the two of them as well? I mean, some people would argue, okay, well, he could just stay and continue going while she could maybe go on vacation or something. It would have maybe, they wouldn't have found out for as long.
Well, she was absolutely very manipulative. I'm not privy to her any psychological evaluations or what her IQ may have been, but I can tell you that she absolutely controlled him. Even while they were in jail, she was sending him messages. You better not confess. You better not tell him what happened. We're going to fight this thing. I mean, at the end of the day, when we looked through all of the evidence and all of the facts, we had some problems that we had to deal with. And Jeffrey understood that. And he just wanted to accept responsibility and kind of move on with his life as best as he can. So we decided to negotiate with the district attorney's office to get a resolution.
Now, upon his extradition here to El Paso, he cooperated with the El Paso police, is that correct?
He did.
Was he the one that led the authorities to Jackson's body?
He was. Okay. It was very emotionally... When I visited with Jeffrey about this, he was an emotional wreck. He couldn't believe that he got talked into doing this. I mean, you talk about remorse. You could just see the pain in his face, knowing what he had done. Knowing he hadn't given his son a proper burial. But I think he was more than anything else, he was angry at himself for the situation he found himself in, and realizing by that point how much he had been manipulated by Jenna.
Did he say, why they didn't contact emergency officials right away?
Well, for one reason, Jackson had already passed away. So they didn't seek any 911 assistance because he had already passed away. He was in a state of shock, and Jenna told him, we got to go. And he went along.
Did he mention at any point to you at what point they found Jackson? Was it like, was he asleep at night and then he just didn't wake up? Or
Yeah, and that's really what happened. Was he seemed to be lethargic, kind of weak. Jenna said, no, he's already eaten, he's fine, he's probably got colic. And then it wasn't until when Jeffrey went over there to try to wake him up and find out what was going on that he realized he's not moving, he's dead.
So Jeffrey was the one that found him unresponsive. Okay. Now, there's also a part in the documents that say that there was a suicide note left in the home. Is that accurate when authorities went to search the home?
There was.
Okay. And who was that written by?
Jenna.
Was it left there on purpose to throw authorities off the track?
It was. That was Jenna's way of manipulating some of the facts.
How long was the baby dead before they went to bury it in the desert?
Oh, I think it was a matter of hours.
Okay, so it was that quickly?
Yes. Once they realized that the baby was dead, they couldn't do anything about it.
Now, I know typically in like CPS cases involving military family, there's some sort of rank, that's notified that there are problems there. In this case, was the military aware that there were issues inside of this home?
I think the military did have notice of those type of issues because there had been some incidents before, as I recall, on base where the MP was called out. It was really more than anything else because of Jenna's aggressiveness. So they were put on notice. But we can't blame the military for what happened.
Okay. At the time of Jackson's death, though, they were living off post.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is, but prior to them living off post, there was incidents on post.
Okay. Kind of forwarding a little bit. So when they were already on their way to Michigan, I have that Jeffrey called his father on the 14th of November and told him that Jackson had died by choking on his own fluids.
Correct.
Did Jeffrey's father ever call the police about that?
I don't know the answer to that. He may have.
The severely decomposed remains of Jackson Ferry were taken to the New Mexico Office of the Medical Investigator in Albuquerque for autopsy. Results returned a month later were inconclusive. Medical investigators could not identify a specific cause of death for Jackson, but did conclude that his very low weight likely played a role in his death. Because the medical examiner could not determine that either Ferry specifically set out to harm Jackson, the El Paso District Attorney had no choice but to charge the couple with a lower count of injury to a child by omission, meaning they omitted to feed their own infant son.
I do know that Jeffrey's father was very instrumental in telling Jeffrey he needed to come forward and make this right, that it was wrong what that they had left, and where is Jackson? As a concerned grandparent, I mean, he was very concerned about what Jeffrey was telling him, and he says, you got to make it right, you got to do it the right thing. I'm thinking back, because you're taxing my memory cells now, I do believe that the father did call the authorities in Michigan to tell them where they were. But he also told Jeffrey that he was going to do that that they could not run.
And from my understanding, it's Jeffrey's parents that now have custody.
That's correct.
Of Blake?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So as someone who was in the media at the time, I was, just following the case was like one day after another and I think anytime you have a death involving a child, it's shocking, but in this case it seemed...
Yeah, well, putting it out in the desert, one of the things that came up is that Jenna was kept insisting that she wanted a shallow grave. And Jeffrey was saying, no, we got to make it deeper. No, we'll make it shallow because this way, if the coyotes find the baby, they can get rid of the evidence. And that was an insight into her mindset. And so he's fighting with her about, no, I'm not going to do that, and we can't do that to our son.
And the YouTube videos that she posted online, they kind of uphold some of your statements about her being a bit aggressive and trying to fight people even online, which is a little odd. But
right. Even while Jeffrey's in custody, it was unbelievable the hold that she still had over him. And she was sending messages in the jail to Jeffrey about why don't you just if you really love me, why don't you just tell him you did it? Why don't you tell him I wasn't there? It was unbelievable how blatant she was. And I'm going to tell you, for a while, Jeffrey said, why shouldn't I do that? I go, because at first it's not true, Jeffrey, for one, and you can't let her manipulate you that way. Well, but she's had problems. I mean, he really is a soft individual that's not very strong. And the control she had over him was frightening to me. It took the separation in the jail was enough for me to talk some sense into him. But even the messages that she was delivering to him, he would almost going back to those dark places and saying, well, maybe I just ought to do what Jenna wants. I said, no, you cannot do that.
Are those sort of notes that they pass back and forth, and that be admitted into evidence, or is that
it's not relevant to the facts of the case? It has not relevant to whether or not he was neglectful and by omission the death of his son happened. So from that, what it was helpful for is me negotiating a sentence that was much lower than Jenna's and really wanting to put the culpability and the blame where it should have been. So from that point of view, and the DAs were aware of it, of all of that information, and that's why you have a disparage in the sentence and why the female got a higher sentence than the male did. Because although she tried to portray herself as the good housewife who was victimized, that was far from the truth.
Was Jenna employed during this time that Jeffrey was out?
My recollection is that she was not. She was just partying.
And as far as Blake is concerned, was he also undernourished when they found him, or was
because
he
that's Jeffrey's composition. So that was yes, he was undernourished, but nowhere near to the extent of Jackson. And Blake was older, so he could speak a little more. He could demand he was hungry, but Jackson was totally dependent on mom and dad, and on mom while Jeffrey was gone for so long.
Do you ever remember hearing from Jenna's parents or anybody close to her about this case?
The only time we heard from Jenna's parents is when they were claiming that they initially wanted custody, and that we started that fight, and they quickly backed off.
So were you part of the custody arrangement?
I had some input. I'm not licensed in Michigan, so I wasn't involved in that formal aspect, but I did everything I could to facilitate and have that happen. That gave Jeffrey a great sense of comfort, at least, and willing to know that while he's going to go away for a while, he knows his son is still in a good place with his family, his parents, who, as he said, they took care of me. I grew up. I have no excuse. I grew up well. They're going to take care of my son.
Jenna was sentenced to 35 years for the charge of injury to a child in the death of Jackson. She also is serving a sentence of 6 years for the charges of child abandonment. That sentence is being served concurrently. She's housed in the young unit of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, located in Dickinson, Texas. Her release date is set for January of 2049. Jeffrey's parents were awarded custody of the surviving child, Blake Ferry. They live just outside of St. Charles in Illinois. We reached out to Jenna's attorney, but we did not receive a reply.
Jeffrey Ferry was sentenced to 20 years in state prison. He's currently housed in the Luther unit of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, located in Navasota, Texas. His earliest release date is April 2022. His latest release date is November 2033.
A special thank you goes out to Joe Spencer and Kat for speaking with us this episode. We'd also like to thank the El Paso Police Department, El Paso County Sheriff's Office, Otero County Sheriff's Office, New Mexico State Police, Joshua Zuber with KFOX, Michael Board from WOAI, and the New Mexico Office of the Medical Investigator. We'd also like to thank our supportive Patreon subscribers and partners with the El Paso Herald-Post for helping us bring this week's episode to you.
This is Charlie Moreno.
This is Andra Litton, and this is Testify.